What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of SSPN Live, a special edition Sunday at 3 o'clock. We got Ethan, we got me, and we got our guy Lou from Miami Heat Beat and Playoff Foul, aka at Saucy Takes, back on the pod to do a little draft recap, talk some free agency. But man, Lou, we could sit here and do a little intro, talk about all this stuff, but let's just jump into it, man. You had Stefon Castle on your at number one on your big board, throughout most of the process. And about a month ago when we had you on before the draft, you said if Stefon Castle's there at 4, the Spurs should sprint to the podium. And while they may have taken a little bit of time on the clock, they did ultimately end up taking Stefon Castle. Man, I'm going to kind of open the floor for you here. What are your thoughts again on, now that this being official, the fit with the Spurs and addressing, needs on the team? And then also just why were you so high on Stefon?
Man, it's just talk about a player who is going to bring a culture, one that Wemby is, like he said it today. I saw what is Wemby most interested in? He said winning, like he's obsessed with winning. You're bringing a winner first and foremost, a guy who was a 5-star, went to UConn, helped them repeat as national champions, like filled his role perfectly. So I think first and foremost, the Spurs are getting an elite level competitor next to Wemby. And, hopefully we'll see how the point guard situation irons out, but they're going to give him a chance. I think he deserves one. And most importantly, he is literally, he does whatever your team needs. And in a draft like this one, where everything was so flat across the board and it was more about fits than finding talent, even though I had Stefon Castle number one and I would have taken him number one, I do think that it's not just who's the best player on your board, is who fits best, because the tiers were so close. But Stefon does both of those things, I think, to a T. You want the shooting to come along. I'm not as worried as other people in that aspect, just because I have seen the balance. I have seen the pull-up shooting, especially going right in the, 15 feet area. I have seen his body control be good. Like, I am really, really, really high on this player going to the San Antonio Spurs. And I think it's good. It's a perfect fit for him, and it's a perfect fit for you guys. He gets to go out there and prove that he's a point guard, and I'll take him with the chip on his shoulder, because he was playing without a chip on his shoulder, and he was playing like a dog on both ends of the court. So with the chip on his shoulder, it's just going to push him more. I am so excited to see the San Antonio Spurs in the summer league. Like we were talking about, like, I'm going to be going out to Cali. I'm trying to catch their game so bad, because so much talent. But I think Castle is really going to shine here with you guys. Don't expect him to come out of the gates firing as a scorer, because that's not who he is. But in terms of impact and winning games, I think he can help you literally off of the tip, like game one.
Yeah, that's honestly kind of how I've started to feel, especially when you think about the defensive versatility. Me and Ethan have already kind of talked about the starting lineup. As much as maybe Devin Vassell right now isn't, like a Gary Payton, lockdown type of defender, having, just a defensive core of Victor, Jeremy Sohan, Stefon Castle, and Devin Vassell. We'll see who plays the 3 for the Spurs. That's kind of up in the air right now. But having those 4 guys on the court, and specifically Stefon, Jeremy, and Wemby, that's definitely going to be a big improvement for the Spurs when we look at, one of the biggest issues last year was defense. But another thing that you talked about that I wanted to touch on, and then Ethan, you can jump in and ask whatever question you want, is Dan Hurley talked about Stefon's shooting mechanics. And I think he described them as like his mechanics are great. Obviously, there's still some work that needs to be done, like you said. But there's also some promise there and some flashes that we've seen as well. But the other thing that he said about Stefon at the draft was he's just scratching the surface. So I kind of wanted to ask you about both of those quotes from Dan Hurley, just because, he's such a respected basketball mind.
No, yeah. Hurley ran a system to win. He didn't run a system to showcase any one particular player, which is why the intrigue is so high, or why my intrigue is so high with Castle, because he has shown flashes of just creating advantages inside of the arc, both on and off the ball. So, I see people saying, obviously, people always project the player improving their shot when they like the player. I wholeheartedly agree. I think that's the difficulty of also scouting, is what players can you project their shots? And I think My particular reason for projecting Castle's shot again is I think his balance is so good inside. His free throw percentages weren't alarming. Um, Alabama let him shoot. He made them pay. So it's not like he's a complete non-factor. I like that Hurley says that he's only scratching the surface because I truly feel that. And there's nobody better to know that than probably like, dare I say, one of the best coaches in college basketball right now, probably even top 3. Like, he knows what he's talking about. He was obviously getting big interest from the Lakers, say with that what you will, but he was garnering attention. He knows what he's doing. He's seen these guys. He's had other guys come in through this program, make it to the NBA. There's a part of coaches talking their players up, but like if you followed Stefon Castle's story all the way up until this point, he's not just talking him up and it doesn't match the tape. He's talking him up, but the tape talks for itself too. Like, you don't even need to listen to Dan Hurley talk about him, and you can see the things that Dan Hurley is then talking about. So I'm like, I came onto your show. I was doing another show and I came onto your show during the pick and I was just geeking for you guys, man. I was super excited because I wanted this for you more than you can imagine. Because Wemby is so special, man. And one of the best ways to get the best out of Wemby is to make his job easier. Offensively, cool, but defensively, so much better. With him on the court, with him off the court, you guys were 2 different defensive teams, literally from the worst team to an above average defensive team. I think that gap is now going to narrow down. It's not going to be as wide, especially with Castle, with some of the guys you got later on in the draft as well. So it's going to be, I think you guys are building this correctly. I have seen a lot of Spurs talk on trades and whatever, and we're going to get into that, I'm pretty sure. But you need to build the foundation brick by brick, man. You don't skip steps. Look at where OKC's at. They didn't skip steps. They still have all their picks. And now they see what their team is. They can go and build whichever way they want to. You guys were like, I saw a lot of people saying like, just give it all up. Go get whoever. Take your time, man. It's a slow, gradual process, but one that gives you more years of competing as opposed to pleasure. Like, it's delayed gratification is the way I view it.
Mm-hmm. The thing that shocks me the most about people that are upset about Castle, I think they're pointing out his shooting and his lack of he hasn't had that many minutes as like a ball dominant traditional point guard playmaker, sure. Right? But at the same time, when you think about where we picked, who was available, who is that guy that was there at 4 that was a better solution than Stefon Castle? Because if those are the only 2 negatives on his game, he does literally everything else like you've been talking about. In his press conference, I think one of the things that caught me was he talked specifically about setting screens and getting other players open in other ways than just passing them the ball coming off a high screen and roll. So like, it's things like that. And that's really what the Spurs system is setting screens, dribble handoffs, and everyone having opportunities to play make, not necessarily like a Trae Young, James Harden, top of the key. That's all he's going to do is dominate the ball and dribble the air out of it. So I'm super excited about this pick. Obviously, it was you, Lou, that really kind of put him at the forefront for me. But my question is this. We saw what DeJounte Murray was able to do when we brought him into the Spurs system. Obviously, he had a very similar game. I think most people compare Stefon to Jimmy Butler his rookie year, but I see a lot of shades of DeJounte Murray. And DeJounte was not a natural playmaker in college. He ended up getting to 7 or 8 assists a game, I think, his last year with us and then with Atlanta. Do you see any similarities between the 2 of them, and can their impact be similar, or do you think his ceiling's even higher than that?
Okay, so first of all, absolutely. In terms of like playmaking and impact, I would say Castle is realistically, I know he wants to play point guard, and I think you guys should give him a chance to, because why not? Like, you took him this high, give him an opportunity. Don't just give it to him either, but like, let him get some of these reps, because you never know where it's going to go in the long term. Like, I fully expect him to be playing on ball this entire summer league. And, the guy you took later on to maybe get the secondary reps, but I expect 80% of the time he's going to be on ball. That doesn't mean a point guard doesn't need to be the one initiating, because like you said, he first of all, in UConn, they didn't run a ball dominant offense. It was a lot of high posts, DHOs, pin down curls, horn sets. And this is where he's comfortable at. Geez, doesn't that sound a lot like the San Antonio Spurs?
Yes, it does.
Like, come on. It's a very similar fit. In terms of impact defensively, I think Murray was and still is, very impactful on ball defender, but he has some like size limitations in terms of like strength and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an issue with Stefon. I would feel very comfortable with Stefon guarding 1 through 4, like 1 through 3, some fours as well. Not that he's going to be a world stopper towards bigs, but he can hold his own. He could do enough to impact that part of the floor. I will say, if there's a knock on Stefon's defensive game, is that he wasn't that much of a defensive quote unquote playmaker. He'd rather force people into tough shots than go and gamble for steals. Maybe that's something that was scheme dependent. Maybe you guys can allow him some more freedom to do some of these things, because I do think his feel is good enough to explore some of these options. But it's just, I'm excited for what you guys are doing, man. And in terms of comps, I don't think Stefon Castle has a 1-to-1 comparison. If I'm being very honest, I've seen Anthony Black floated around. I think he's a better athlete than Anthony Black was, or at least played more under control than Anthony Black did. I keep coming back to like Markelle Fultz and what he's turned into, but like you're getting Markelle at 18 or 19. Like you're not getting this version of Markelle Fultz where it's like due to like a nervous issue that he can never improve his jump shot. It's, bigger body, like hybrid playmaker. Castle's more off ball. Like that's why, again, I don't like comps, but he is that shade of defender. If you can bring out some of the offensive juice and stuff like that, I think it'll be a pick definitely worthwhile. And to your point, I don't know who was there on the board at 4 that you could have said, for sure, like this is the guy that we would want. I think as much as I love Castle, if Reed Shepherd was there at 4, I do think you would have to consider that fit just because of the floor spacing that he brings right away. But, you guys didn't have to make that hard of a decision, in my opinion. So,
right.
Yeah, man, there's a lot that I want to touch on there. Just going back to something we were talking about a little bit earlier with the shooting. I mean, the last time we were on here, we brought up Tyrese Maxey's college percentage. I've seen some Drew Holiday comparisons as well.
Yeah.
He wasn't a great shooter in college. Paul George wasn't a great shooter in college. I mean, we could go. Jaylen Brown wasn't a great shooter in college. I mean, and obviously a lot of these guys are all-stars. So, you never know for sure. Like, you're going to have to wait and see how things play out. But this is a top 5 pick. And there were a lot of other people throughout this process that had Stefon at number 1 on their big boards as well. I saw there was an Eastern Conference executive that basically said if Stefon drops to 4 and goes to the Spurs, OMG, they're going to be a B word. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it's not. I mean, that's an Eastern Conference executive right there. So I mean. Anyways, we're going to have to see how the shooting plays out, but there's been a ton of examples of, guys not being great shooters in college and improving. And we talked on that last time. But just to wrap up this Castle discussion, let's all give out our grades here. Lou, I know you've already given yours out on Twitter, but just for the people who haven't seen, what is your grade on this 4th pick here for the Spurs?
It's an A+. It's an A+. Like, in my opinion, he was the number 1 player on in this entire draft class. I'm willing to be wrong on that too. Like, it is what it is. But what I saw on tape, how I think it'll translate, and just the impact that he makes alongside with the fit culture wise and like on the floor wise, along with your best player, I think it was a no-brainer. It's an A+ pick for me.
You can go ahead, Ethan.
Appreciate it, Jude. I'm also going to go with A+ for every reason that Lou just stated, as well as there's nobody else at the 4th spot that I think would have been anywhere near as good of a pick for us and our fit looking forward. And you can talk all you want about how terrible of a 3-point shooting team we were last year. That is all completely true, but you have to also address defensively. Like Lou said, without Wemby, we were the worst defensive team I have probably ever had the displeasure of watching on TV. So this is an immediate addressment of that, if that's a word.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is on a Spurs channel, and we're all going to end up giving him an A+. I'm going to give it an A+ too, but the reason that I give it an A+ is just because, bluntly, I think he was the best player on the board at 4. Like, regardless of big boards and all that stuff, at 4, in my opinion, he was the best overall player on the floor. And there's a lot of people also that I didn't mention, earlier, talking about the Eastern Conference executive, that felt like he's the most sure thing, or, has the highest chance of being an all-star in this draft as well. And again, we'll have to see how all of that plays out. But to be hearing that from people around the league on top of our own thoughts on this, it just gets me so excited. And as we've talked about earlier, I'm just really excited, especially being in the Western Conference with Luka Doncic in our division, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Anthony Edwards, bigger, more physical guards. As much as, Stefon's just a rookie next season, but we actually have somebody who can physically match up with those guys, which was such an issue for the Spurs matchup wise this season. So I'm so excited for that need to be addressed. And with the assets that we're gaining, like that's the other thing. It's, we're taking our time with this, and there could be a move, in the near future or in a year to, address that shooting very aggressively.
Yes.
Yeah. No, 100%.
But yeah, let's move on to the second pick that the Spurs made in the draft. And we're not sure if he's going to be on the team as of late. Me and Ethan talked after the stream that we did last time. I believe it was after, maybe it was on air. But I thought that, maybe Juan Nunes could potentially play Summer League, but I totally forgot about him being on the Olympic roster for Spain. So he will not be on the Spurs Summer League roster. But Lou, I don't know how much you've heard about, us potentially stashing him in Europe for a season. But what are your thoughts on the pick as him as a player and fit with SA, as well as, him potentially being stashed?
One thing I'm not going to do is lie. I wasn't a fan of the selection. I'm going to keep it very, very honest. I think there was other ways that you guys could have gone to improve the roster, as opposed to trying to force I felt like you really wanted to get a traditional point guard. And, some of the things Juan Nunes does with the ball in his hands, he has, I had a scout reach out to me who was an international scout, and he was like, this is the best pick and roll passer I have scouted this year. And that's a lot of praise. I don't know if I fully agree, but he's definitely top 3. So that's right away. That's what he brings. You want a ball dominant, like pick and roll playmaker, somebody who can make skips with both hands off a live dribble, see the entire floor. All that is absolutely wonderful. The knock on him is the jumper. I don't think it looks beautiful. I don't think the percentages back it up either. So shot 55% from the free throw line. That is not where you want to be, especially as a guard. The 3-point has a little bit of a hitch to it, but I do think offensively, in terms of just spraying out the ball, once you do start getting some of these shooters in here, and maybe he is a stash candidate. If I was you guys, I would like for him to be stashed personally. So it's just, I wish, basically, you guys came into the draft with 4 selections. So if you traded one away for a future asset, and then you're stashing another one, so you're coming out of the draft with just 2 picks. Maybe that's intentional. 25 draft is going to be fucking insane. I'm going to be very honest. So maybe you guys did that intentionally. I don't know. But in terms of just for a pure like pick grade, I wasn't the biggest fan of him. I have some questions, some limitations athletically, but he is very crafty. I don't think he has the best touch either. Very grounded player, but he does some things offensively where you can see him translate. That's why I would just like to see him get stashed and see what happens. But all in all, Juan Nunes is a very, like, if you're picking in the second round, my whole thing is, what is your elite trait? Because I don't want to take somebody in the second round who does a lot of things at an average level. Like that to me is just, if you do a lot of things at an average level prior to coming into the NBA draft, it's very hard for those things to maintain average into the league. So you get what I'm saying? You're not a specialized player. So in Nunes's case, he does have an elite trait, and that is his passing and his vision. So it gives him a higher chance of stake. I don't completely hate the pick. I just would have gone in another direction. That's all I'll say.
So what's your official grade? It's okay.
No, I think the grade is a C-. I don't completely hate the pick. I don't think it's horrible. I think it fits a need. Clearly, you guys scouted him very deeply. I was hearing rumors about Juan Nunes being a second round pick to you guys throughout the entire course. So, didn't do a great job of keeping that under wraps, but you got your guy. Like, there's something that they saw, that they identified, that they liked in him. And he does have this, again, I keep going back to it, but an elite passing trait. His jumper actually looks a lot better when he does it off the dribble. then off the catch, it looks a little funky, especially off the dribble on step backs. It looks a little better than off the dribble going forward. But again, it's let's see how his athleticism translates into the league and how some of his craft and lack of he's not a small player at the position. At least he measured like 6'3.5", so he's going to be like 6'5" in shoes. It's a pretty good point guard size, but C- is kind of ultimately where I probably ended up with that.
Yeah, Ethan, what are your thoughts on Juan Nunes and your personal grade?
I haven't given him too much investigation. I do know that he is an elite playmaker, but like Lou said, that's really the only thing that has come like jumped off of his highlight reel and off the draft profiles that I've been reading for him. He is very young, so he has the potential, I guess, to be. Everyone on Spurs Twitter keeps comparing him to Manu Ginobili. Lou, I don't know if you've caught any of that.
I have seen.
I haven't seen that.
You haven't
believe it or
seen that?
not.
It's
I
gonna
can't believe it.
Well, you get the parallels. You get the people that think this is the worst pick of all time, like this is the next Milos Teodosic or whatever the Clippers took a few years back.
Yeah.
And then you have people that are like, no, this is the next Manu. And I get it because we're the Spurs and we have a history with foreign prospects that no one really knows that much about. And it could be Nikola Milutinov, who we took a few years back in the first round that we never see in an actual Spurs uniform, or he could be Manu Ginobili, who's a Hall of Famer that was picked 57th and was a 99 that nobody heard about. So I get that there's, I guess, low risk because he was a second round pick. And to be honest, I don't know who else was available at that time. Lou would know more about that. Somebody that could be a little more impactful. But if he does work out, if he can figure out his jump shot, if his athleticism somehow finds a way to translate, I think his ceiling's probably closer to like what a Ricky Rubio looked like. And that's not just because of the Spanish correlation, but because of his limitations. But the one thing that Ricky Rubio had for sure was his ability to play make and somehow, find gaps in the lane. So I would go with a C plus, maybe just a little bit more positive than Lou. But I'm not expecting anything crazy from this guy.
Yeah, Ethan, you said a lot of my thoughts there, and obviously, Lou, you covered a bunch as well. The thing that I would say about Juan Nunes, that the first thing that I think of that hasn't been said is just that even if he was on the roster this year, he's probably going to be in the G League. So that's the thing about stashing him that I'm not too mad at, is that it's not necessarily apples to apples, but it is very similar, especially if he ends up moving up a league. We've had some people comment that he could potentially play in the Euro League next year. I know he was in the German league, and we kind of had some thoughts about this. You can maybe, if you have some info on this that we don't, Lou, please jump in. But could he maybe elevate to LMB Pro A in the French league? Like, do you know how that works?
So actually what happened is he signed a contract with FC Barcelona. So if he does decide to get stashed, he's going to be playing in Barcelona. So that is a like that is the top ACB team, and that's the top ACB league in Spain. So yes, he would be Euro League eligible because he was playing in the second league in Germany. So if he had to elevate, it would have been to the first league. He was playing alongside Pacome Dadier, which I have a love affair with. I wish he would have been Spurs.
So does Jude.
Yes, it happened late in the process, but that happened to me too, and I definitely I would have preferred him as well. But I also see why the Knicks picked him where they did. But to give my grade on Juan Nunes, I'm gonna go in a sandwich. I'm gonna go with C. We had C plus, C minus. I'll go with C here. And it's just kind of, as much as the elite trait is there for sure. And I hope that down the line it works out and maybe he can become a rotation player for us. Like, that's what I hope and wish for. With the defensive limitations, as much as there are some flashes with the jumper, it not being that consistent. I'm rolling with that there too, especially like there were some other guys that maybe were potentially on the board, like Johnny Furphy. When we first picked him, I was actually pretty excited about that. I know he's very young, but just because that would bring in immediate shooting. But before we move on to the Spurs' next pick, Lou, I want to ask you, what are some other players maybe that were available there that you would have preferred? I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here.
Oh no, man, I came ready, man. Perfectly. Like, honestly, if I was San Antonio there, I would have considered Furphy because I did like Furphy. Actually, I was a lot lower on Furphy than most people. I had him in like a second round grade, but he fell exactly towards like where I kind of projected him. So I'm, patting myself on the back for that one too. But I would have probably, considering I took Castle earlier, I would have considered Juricic. I really like Nikola Juricic. He went 43 to the Atlanta Hawks after we traded back with them, but he's an upside swing kind of guy. But if you were looking at more somebody to come in right away, I really liked AJ Mitchell. Really liked Bobby Clintman. Jalen Wells, talk about immediate shooter. I really liked him. I like Cam Christie, 18, and an immediate shooter as well. So I wish you guys would have. If I was there, I would have probably considered one of those three guys. Clintman is more of a 3-4.
Right.
Wells is more of a 2-3, and Christie's more of like a pure 2. But I think Wells or Mitchell would have been my pick. But that still, I understand the whole process here. Like, I do think you guys are going to let him. Like, he went to. I think it's just ironic that he signed with Barcelona. There were rumors about him and you guys, so I do think it was all intentional in a sense.
Yeah, no, I can totally see your train of thought there, Lou. You got anything, Ethan, before we move on?
I think the Olympics will be a perfect time for us to see what this guy's about because he'll be playing against elite competition. I don't know what the Spanish roster looks like. I don't know if he's starting or if he'll be a bench piece for them, but either way, it'll be fun to watch.
100%.
That is a great point, Ethan, and that will be starting up soon. Speaking of which, I've already seen some Jeremy Sohan highlights popping up on the TL with Poland playing in some friendlies. So definitely looking forward to the basketball that will come next week. But finally, we have our last pick, which was Harrison Ingram from North Carolina. And Lou, you immediately texted us when we had the pick. I saw Kevin O'Connor tweet that he felt like this was a perfect fit. And I don't know if he said it was necessarily a steal, but I think at where we got him, he liked it a lot. Me and Ethan, we really were introduced to him right then and there when he got picked. So Lou, please give us your breakdown on Harrison Ingram.
Man, he was somebody I don't think it was a steal because you got him it was 48 if I'm not mistaken. But I do think it was very, very good value. I think I finished with him like 43 or 41 on my big board. But in terms of culture fit, played several years in college, goes to North Carolina, and literally leads the ACC in rebounding as a power forward. And as a 6'5" and a quarter-inch power forward, like an absolute just dog on the rebounds, on the glass, defensively, does a lot of the little things well. Really liking him to like a PJ Tucker. That's kind of the vibes that I was getting when I was watching him. Not because PJ Tucker was an exceptional rebounder or anything like that, but just in terms of intangibles, he has them. Hello, San Antonio. 6'5", 6. Really, he's like 6'6.5" in shoes, 240, 235, 7-foot wingspan. Like, this guy is going to go out there and he's going to do a lot of the dirty work. He's going to, he's going to guard up sometimes. He's going to guard down sometimes. But I just think he does enough things at a very good level that he's going to be, somebody who's going to be impactful. I do expect him to get some rotation burn, at least a chance to get some of these minutes, because the jump shot just came across this last year, but he did shoot a lot of them. So
yeah, I saw that 4.6 per game. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so 4.6 per game, shot like 38.5%. The free throw percentage isn't what you wanted it to be, but it just shows that he's only 21 as well. So it's not like he's an older prospect. Like, I think 21 is probably like the average age for an NBA draft pick. So I do think that there's still some untapped shooting that can probably progress a little bit, or even if it doesn't progress, if you get a 38% 3-point shooter, I don't think you'll complain, especially if he's a 3-and-D guy. The concerns obviously are he's not the most adept ball handler. He's not the best finisher. He does have some good connective passing, but it's mostly like he's a 3-and-D guy. He's a 3-and-D guy who does the dirty work, who helps rebound at a very, very high level, but he is, he kind of, his athletic limitations are kind of subdued, I think, due to the fact that he is 235 with a 7-foot wingspan. I think he weighs more than Wemby right away. So like it's a nice combat to him and a nice little like piece to put alongside Wemby or alongside some of your bench units to help aid in, gang rebounding, and he closes off defensive possessions. So I think this is another guy that you took because of his defense, because of his, ideally to like space eventually in the NBA, but we'll see where he goes. I thought it was very, very good value where you guys took him. And I think culture wise, it was a very, like you identified, the Spurs identified the guys that fit into their, not just their team, but like the way that they like to go about things. And I think with Castle and Ingram, it was, 2 for 2 in that sense, for sure.
Mm. Yeah, I love his personality. I don't know if either of you watch his press conferences with the Spurs, but he speaks so easily, fluently. Like he doesn't have
Mhm.
to think about his questions. He doesn't feel scripted at all. He does speak Spanish. So I love
Oh,
his character. I like his personality. Fits with San Antonio. I agree with everything that Lou said. The comp that I thought of literally just now, and I think he's a more physically gifted, obviously a little bit bigger version of Josh Hart. What he is able to do with the Knicks because of the rebounding, 3-and-D. Pretty much that's all he does. Josh Hart's not really a put it on the floor kind of guy. He does push in transition, so I guess there is that missing part of his game that Ingram can work on developing. But if he can work on his dribbling, I think he could be maybe a rotational 3-4 combo. But right now, I think he's absolutely like the third string four. And the only reason I don't think he'll get much rotational burn this season,
mhm.
Lou, is because of CD Sissoko. And I
Oh,
think he'll get the nod before
for sure.
Ingram. And I think he'll be playing kind of the third string power forward this season. So he'll probably start off in the G League. But I do think he's got a lot of like Swiss Army knife ability to be, like you said, the do the dirty work kind of guy off the bench. And Jude and I talked about it. We haven't drafted yet kind of our version of Lou Dort. Like OKC has Lou Dort who does all the dirty things that like they have a lot of star potential that can score, and then they have Lou Dort as well. So I think this could
100%.
be like our version of Lou Dort for our team.
Yeah, Lou, please respond to that.
No, no, absolutely. Like, yeah, and that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, he's a guy who does the things that the stat, like the stat sheet doesn't say, but he sets a good hammer screen here, gets a shooter open, sets a
Mm-hmm.
good backdoor here, like cuts well, occupies a space which allows somebody else behind him. Like he's somebody who is a very unselfish player on the court, and he doesn't really care what his shine is. And then also, like he came from shooting 32%, 31 and 32% his first 2 years at Stanford to jumping up to like 38 and a half. And, going from 113 to 170 attempts, that is pretty good. He shot 39% on catch and shoot and 46% when he was open, like on threes. It's somebody who showed that, like, I know that this is my niche to get into the league.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Defense, rebounding, and this. I'm going to perfect my craft. Again, it's a second round pick. You're not expecting this guy to do everything. It's what can he do at an elite level, rebounding, defense, and ideally space the floor in the NBA. And I do think he will, the thing with City, if City can shoot, I think he can play more of a 3 than a 4 role. I view Ingram solely as a 4
Okay.
in like a small ball 4, just because I don't think but again, you have Wemby. So,
True.
typically your 4 and 5s don't dribble, but Wemby does whatever. But in his case, I like his handle and his inability to create for himself off the dribble might hamper some of his ability to play the 3.
Yeah, I wanted to ask kind of where you viewed him, positionally coming into the NBA, but the wingspan, I did not know that. As much as he is a little bit undersized height wise, he is definitely not undersized in weight and in wingspan. So that definitely gives
At
me
all.
some comfortability, and that kind of ties into the PJ Tucker comp again. The last thing with Harrison Ingram for me is I'm just not sure if the Spurs are going to put him on a two-way, basically. And, I think we're going to have to wait and see how that plays out. They kind of last year with CD, they kind of dragged it out for a while. We weren't sure if he was going to be a two-way or if he was going to be on full contract. He ended up being on full contract, still spent most of the league in the G League. But that's kind of the main thing that I'm watching with Harrison Ingram. But man, with everything that you've talked about and the flashes that I have seen on top of the shooting improvement, that kind of reminds me a little bit of Devin Carter's shooting improvement, just in the sense of the way that, had 2 seasons prior,
Yeah.
then took the most of his career while increasing the percentage. You love to see that. And the other thing is we just tendered a qualifying offer to Sandro Mamukelashvili, who had a really good end to the season, as much as, it was the end of the season with a lot of teams sitting guys. The 4 was the most open spot on our roster. So for you to tell us that he's a 4,
Mm.
that slides right in for us positionally. And if we want to play Mamu for this season, depending on what contract it is, he can develop in the G League, maybe take over for him if he continues to develop. But man, speaking Spanish in San Antonio and having all the character traits that he does, I'm very happy with it. But what's your official grade, Ethan? We'll dish it to you after that, and then we'll end with me.
I think it's an A minus. Again, I think it's a very, like, considering the pick at 48, you're typically the guys who get picked here don't play much. Like, but still, I do think culture wise, I think fit wise, I think what he can bring to you is something that you guys desperately need. Your 4 spot now obviously isn't the most adept, and Sohan does some things for you there. With Mamu as well, he didn't he slim down a lot for you guys? I felt like he was bigger in Milwaukee, and he looked a little bit.
I didn't watch enough in Milwaukee to give you an honest answer.
No, okay, no, it's fair. But he did showcase some things. But even then, like, he's somebody he's very versatile. So I really, really just like the pick. I think it'll work. I think, at the minimum, he'll be an NBA level player. Depends if he gets burned or not. Like, that's kind of where it is. But I don't think he'll ever be some kind of crazy superstar, but he'll be somebody that you will keep on your roster. I know I comped him to PJ Tucker, but I do think, like, Haywood Highsmith kind of vibes. Like, when I was watching him, seeing Miami, obviously, PJ and Highsmith, I do think he gets a little bit of that thing. And, Highsmith apparently has a lot of value apparently in the open market. So.
Okay, Ethan, I'm going to jump in here because I just had a player comp jump into mind. Mm-hmm. What about like a bigger former Heat player? I'm pretty sure Derrick Jones Jr.
Oof. Not the level of athlete, okay. I will say, because Derrick Jones Jr. is a fucking incredible athlete.
Right.
But in terms of, like, defensively switchable, you can put him on just about anybody. I like it. I just, think 35 pounds heavier.
Right.
And some sizable strength difference. But yeah, definitely that mode of 3-and-D player. Like, you don't want Derrick Jones Jr. dribbling much at all.
Right.
Just play finisher, shoot, and do your thing on defense.
Crash the boards. Yeah.
Exactly. Crash the boards on both sides of the court. He had an insane rebound percentage number for a forward. It was like 20% rebound percentage, which is really, really high.
I'm also going to go with an A- for my grade, and there's no sense in me repeating exactly what Lou said, so I won't. But I do want to ask Lou one quick question, Jude. It does not have to be a long answer. What do you think of seeing Derrick Jones Jr. play so well in the playoffs for the Mavericks?
I loved it, man. I loved it. I hold no grudge against, like, guys when they leave Miami. I'm the complete opposite. I want them to thrive unless it's Hassan Whiteside. I'll be very blatant with that. I'm not a fan. But, like, it's amazing to see players develop and even Derrick Jones Jr. bounced around after Miami, went to Portland, went to Chicago, then ended up in Dallas, and then that's on a minimum. And credit Jason Kidd for giving him a role that he thrived in, making it simple for him. A lot of these players just come down to, like, role fits and schematics more than talent, because Derrick Jones Jr. was not one of the 5 most talented guys on that Dallas roster, but it's how well can you fit around the stars. And again, credit to San Antonio. Harrison Ingram does that. Stefon Castle does that and has the potential to be, even if it's a low tier all-star, I think he does. So, credit to you guys for knocking it out of the park there.
Thank you. We try our best.
Yes, we do. And that'll basically wrap up this one. I'm going to go with you guys and give it an A- as well. And with all that being said, let's jump straight in to the free agency discussion. What are y'all predictions for free agency? This doesn't have to be too long, but just what are your thoughts on the Spurs and just free agency coming up here soon?
Go ahead, Lou.
Oh, man. I don't really know what's going to happen in free agency. I feel like there's so much rumors flying around. There's so many players not signing or signing, and teams that need cap space and don't need cap space. And it's just a lot of, I think free agency has kind of been on the decline for several years now. I've actually been very adamant, like, aside from Jalen Brunson, who's been the best free agent that has been signed over the last 5 years, And there's not really many guys. Like, I'm gonna be honest, you have to acquire these guys via trade. Now that's kind of the market that we're in. But
Mhm.
I do think you can find some of these lower quality role players who can fit in, but I don't think you're gonna find any stars. I'm curious to see what you guys do at the forward position. I do think you still need some kind of shooting, especially getting Castle now offensively. So I'm curious to see who you go after, whether that's via trade or via free agency for the small forward wing position in particular.
Mm. No, I would agree with that statement. It's hard to kind of predict what the Spurs are going to do anyway in free agency, but this one feels especially difficult to figure out. If I was a betting man, I would say we just bring back pretty much the same exact team, minus Chetty Osman, who I think will probably go to a different team, who's an unrestricted free agent that we had last year at the backup small forward position. If we were to make a move, weirdly, it feels like the bigger names are more likely than some of these littler names, which is
Mhm.
strange to me because I think we've been rumored to be talking with Paul George. I really doubt that's going to happen. I think he's more so a Philly or a Warriors guy at this point. I think to some of the other power forwards that are available, like a Tobias Harris, who's looking to prove his worth after a really rough playoff berth. He was rumored to come to San Antonio. I also don't think that's very likely. But then you start looking at some of these other names, and there was a name I was looking at the other day. It was Kendall Brown, who was a second round pick a couple of years back. I think he's 21, 6'7", can play 3 or 4. Terrible stats. But do the Spurs take a reach on this guy, see if he can have like a better showing on a poor team with some consistent minutes? Possibly, but I'm with Lou. I'm not ready to really make any solid predictions because there really haven't been that many rumors of real credibility to discuss in free agency.
Yeah, I mean, we're just going to have to see how it all plays out. You never know. You can never predict any of this stuff. But the one rumor I will say, me and Ethan talked about it last time. Woj did mention on the draft, and we've heard some more stuff about this. I don't think this is going to happen. There's definitely a lot better teams in play that I think Paul George will be going to. But he
Hmm.
did mention the
He
Spurs
did.
as a team to watch. I think that would be a perfect fit. Obviously, I don't think that we're going to do it. I don't think it's very likely, but I would love to see that. And I would also just love to see maybe an upgrade at the backup too. We also did tender a qualifying offer to David Duke Jr. So
Hmm.
that's something else that, could potentially, maybe he could end up taking the backup two spot with how he played in the G League last year. But otherwise, really, we're just going to have to wait and see how it all plays out. But I would like to see maybe, a little upgrade here or there. Ethan mentioned a Tobias Harris. I wouldn't be mad about that. But at the end of the day, it's just so unpredictable.
One name I did forget to mention, Contavious Caldwell Pope. I think he's also somebody that would rather go to a contender. I think about the Mavericks, he'd be a perfect fit next to Luca. But if he's not really about winning and the Spurs are willing to give him a contract, he's one of my favorite players and would immediately, he may be a 6'5", slightly undersized small forward, but if we want to start him at our small forward spot, that's an immediate upgrade for us at that position. And just to name this guy, because everyone wants to talk about him, Chris Paul. Um, if he did want to come for a vet minimum, sure. Like, let's bring him in. He'll throw lobs to Wemby. He'll probably do similar things that he did with OKC a few years back, as far as like establishing a winning mentality for some of our young guys and taking them under their wing. But will he impact winning, make us a playoff team like he did for them? Absolutely not. And I think it's more likely that he'll go play with, like, if he's going to take a vet minimum anyway, I think he'll go to the Lakers and just play with LeBron. Like, I feel like that's a way more likely decision for him than coming to San Antonio.
Yeah, completely agree there, Ethan. I guess the one thing I would also mention, because we've talked about this before on the show, Ethan, is that Laurie Markkinen, that is another one name that I would also definitely be into if the Spurs
Yes.
wanted to trade for him. Obviously, that would take a lot, and I think that's a little bit of a pipe dream, but I would
Yeah.
love that as well.
Can I mention one name? Oh, sorry, Lou. Were you going
No.
to say
No,
something?
no. I was
Uh,
just gonna say, like, yeah, every NBA team should want Laurie Markkinen on their roster. So
right.
it's gonna be a straight up bidding war. I do think Danny Ainge, who is now the like the one calling the shots over there in Utah, he likes to win his deals. Like,
Hmm.
that's in his, even when he was in Boston, like, he would not make a deal unless he felt like he comfortably won that deal. And
Mhm.
I'm just curious as to how much it'll take for Laurie. I do think it's a bit of a pipe dream, but if you talk about a 7-footer who can space the floor alongside Wemby, like yikes, like that
Mhm.
is a gorgeous, gorgeous fit. I'm curious if you guys would even like try to make a run. I really actually, even if Tobias is only on a 1 or a 2 year deal with a player option, kind of like what Bruce Brown got from the Pacers. Talk about floor spacing. Like
Mhm.
that's one thing that he's going to provide for you guys right away. The defense, it's going to be a little questionable at times, but if you can just encapsulate him and he just be an offensive hub, or an offensive, not hub, but like an offensive scorer, a go-to guy for you from time to time to take some pressure off of Wemby and Devin Vassell, obviously. I did want to mention one thing. I have one question to ask you guys.
Okay.
How did you guys feel about Barlow not getting the qualifying offer?
Go ahead, Jude. This is Jude's guy. Go ahead.
I could do a whole long-winded thing on this, but I've done it so many times. The last thing that I'm going to say is just that I understand it with the way that Mamu played at the end of the season.
Mhm.
I think that he just kind of ended up winning that battle. I wouldn't mind bringing him back on a two-way, that last two-way as well. It looks like there's still a potential that the Spurs could have interest in him. So if we did bring him back in some fashion, I wouldn't be mad. But at the same time, it I get it at the end of the day. And it's sad. It's very sad. I'm going to miss my boy Dom Beasy that I made videos about 2 years ago, and I really liked his upside, but I just wish him the best in his future.
I love him. If it were up to me, if it was just possible, I would just be like, okay, we're gonna take Zach's contract and we're just gonna hand it to Barlow and then let Zach walk. Like that would be ideal, but obviously that can't happen.
No, I love Barlow. That's why I was shocked when I yesterday I was away from my phone, but when I finally got into bed and I was like just scrolling trying to catch up, I saw that you didn't like offer him anything. I was like, is this the guy that I'm thinking this is? Like, let me just double check because I saw him in the G League and I'm in the summer league, and I was like, who is this? I had to go back and find out who he was because I didn't know who he was up until then, and I saw the OTE games, and I was like, oh, I'm sold on this kid.
Mm.
And I watched him play for you guys last year at times, and he looked really, really good too. So, and he's only 2021. I was just shocked. That's my initial reaction was like, whoa, Miami, please go get this
Yeah,
guy.
right. That's a guy Miami would just turn into like an all-star like in 1 year. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
even if he's just a backup for now. And I'm a fan of Barlow. I had to ask because I wanted to get it straight from Spurs fans, not just from
Mm.
like my, I guess, biased opinion on what I saw him play.
Mm.
Well, with that being said, guys, we appreciate all y'all being in here, and I think that will wrap up. Okay, one more thing, Ethan.
Sorry, I wanted to say this earlier, but I forgot to say it real quick. Real quick. If we are going to make a big move, I also think we should try trading for Cam Johnson from the Nets because I think they're blowing it up, and I
Ooh.
think he'd be an immediate upgrade at small forward for us.
Mm.
I definitely would like the fit there, Ethan, and I would like the spacing as well. I think we're going to wrap this episode up here, guys. We appreciate all you guys being in here today. And if you have any Spurs thoughts and things like that, be sure to leave them in the comments. Tell us what your free agency predictions are, and we will catch y'all in the next one. Ooh.